Hello, good afternoon. This afternoon, we're going to discuss estate and donors tax. Shall we start? Okay, as a background, we all know that estate and donors tax are types of transfer taxes. For estate taxes, you can find it under starting from section 84. And then the definition of the gross estate may be found in section 104. Estate or gifts include the real and personal property, whether tangible or intangible, mixed, or wherever it is situated. The rate of tax is 6% of the net estate. And then, pursuant to the latest law on estate and donors tax, based on, there's a latest law, right? We call it the Train 1. There were a lot of amendments made for estate taxes. Of course, as to valuation, we'll still value it at the time of death. Just want to point out that estate tax is a form of excise tax because it's a tax that is imposed on the right of transmitting property at the time of death and on the privilege that a person is given in controlling to a certain extent the disposition of his property. These are the current the current rule is that for estate tax, the rate is at 6%. But of course, we should not forget that under the current tax code provision, it may still be applicable, right, to various court decisions or court cases that are pending right now because it's still applicable because you need to determine the time when the decedent died. So if the decedent died before January 1, 2018, the rates applicable would still be under the old tax code provision. The rate would be 5% to 20%. And then if the decedent died starting or after January 1, 2018, the rate will be 6%. So for the equation, we have this equation: gross estate less allowable deductions equals the taxable estate. And then we apply the rate of 6% to get the estate tax due. Okay, so that is why it's very important to determine what is the gross estate. So we will need to go back to our provisions to determine the gross estate. Then we'll discuss that this afternoon. We'll also determine the allowable deductions. We have to be very careful because the train law made a lot of amendments to these allowable deductions. Okay. So who are subject to the estate taxes? In the slides, in the screen that you're currently seeing right now, currently the following are subject to the estate taxes. Letter A, Filipino citizens and resident aliens. So there are two general categories, Filipino citizens and resident aliens. And then the second one is non-resident alien. So there's a significant difference between these two categories. So we need to know that for Filipino citizens, they're going to be taxed. The decedent's estate will compose of properties that are both within and without the Philippines. And also for non-resident aliens, it will be the estate tax shall be applicable for properties which at the time of his death were located in the Philippines. So for non-resident aliens, we need to be very careful because there are rules that we need to apply. So the first one would be the rule on reciprocity and also the rules on the intangible personal property. So there are cases that are assigned to you in your syllabus, right? So there's the case of CIR versus Fisher, CIR versus Campos Rueda. Okay? So in those cases, it was discussed, it was clearly discussed that if the other country does not impose estate taxes to Filipino citizens or those properties that are located in those countries, then we can follow the principle of reciprocity in such a way that we will not also impose estate taxes to those properties that are located within the Philippines but are owned by non-resident aliens. But of course, we need to be very careful because this rule of reciprocity does not apply to all types of properties, okay? So it will only apply to intangible personal properties, okay? So the rule of reciprocity in relation to the intangible personal property of a non-resident alien individual would be as follows. Okay, such intangible personal property will be if with reciprocity, of course, it will be excluded or shall not be included in the gross estate of the decedent. Okay? So there would be reciprocity if the laws of the foreign country to which the decedent was a citizen and resident at the time of death did not impose a transfer tax of any character in respect of intangible personal property of citizens of the Philippines not residing in the foreign country. Or the laws of the foreign country allow a similar exemption from transfer or death taxes of every character owned by citizens of the Philippines not residing in that foreign country. So it can be it's there's two types, right, of reciprocity. They totally do not impose any transfer tax on intangible personal property, or the country would allow an exemption for citizens of the Philippines that are residing in that foreign country. So we have to also take note, based on the cases that were assigned to you, the definitions of what a country is for estate tax purposes. Does it require um, does it require recognition of the all countries in the world as a separate and independent country? You need to review um, your case, especially the case of CIR versus Fisher. Okay? So if there is no reciprocity, the intangible personal property of a non-resident alien shall be excluded from the gross estate. Okay? So what are the rules on valuation? So type of property is listed here. If you have real property, the rule is that whichever is higher between the fair market value that's determined by the commissioner. Where can you find it? Of course, the commissioner has this power to determine zonal values based on the tax code. And the zonal values are published and is actually can be accessed actually through the BIR website. So you determine that value and also you compare that with the zonal valuation that's provided by the local government units through their provincial and city assessors. So whichever is higher between the two will be the basis of the valuation of the estate. For personal properties, whether it is tangible or intangible personal property, it is appraised at fair market value. As to shares of stocks, if it's an unlisted common stock, of course, you just look at the book value of the shares. I just want to point out that under RR6/2013, there are rules as to the valuation of the shares. And actually, if you look at RR12/2018, which is the latest IRR, the latest revenue regulations that implement the Train 1, it specifically indicated there that RR6/2013 is not applicable. Okay? So you might be curious, what is RR6/2013? Actually, RR 6-2013 talks about valuation of shares of stocks that are unlisted, okay? Meaning it's not listed in the stock exchange. Valuation of those unlisted shares based on the adjusted fair market value. Okay, so if a company who has shares, um, before you can determine the book value of the common shares of that company, you need to determine whether there are real properties owned by that company. If there are, you still need to get the latest fair valuation or appraisal report of that property and adjust, okay, the fair market values in the audited financial statements to get the fair market value of the shares. So you will get the net assets, total assets of the company based on the fair market valuation of those real properties, if they have any, divide it less any liabilities, and then divide it by the total outstanding shares. The amount that you get will become the fair market value of the unlisted share. But of course, that RR 6-2013 is not applicable for valuations as to shares of stocks for estate tax purposes. Okay? And I just want to update you that in 2020, the BIR also issued a revenue regulation totally disregarding 6-2013. So we don't need to have a problem. We don't have a problem anymore with this RR 6-2013 because actually RR 6-2013 gives you a lot of challenges, right? When you are faced with selling of shares, you cannot pay the capital gains tax on that sale of shares if you still do not have the latest appraisal value of the um, of any real property that is owned by the company whose shares were being sold. Okay, so for listed shares, oh, for unlisted preferred shares, it is based on par value. But for listed, okay, so you can see it in the screen. You can get the mean between the highest and the lowest quotation at the date nearest to the death. Okay, if none is available, is on the date of death itself. As to the right to use of use or habitation, as well as that of annuity, so you also need to value it um, based on that basis. Now we go to the composition of the gross estate. Actually, this is a challenging topic because there are a lot of principles that will be touched on here. So it talks about the decedent's interest, okay? Transfers in contemplation of death, revocable transfers, property passing under the general power of appointment, proceeds of life insurance and prior interest, transfers of insufficient consideration, and the capital of the surviving spouse. We will discuss this one by one. Okay. For the decedent's interest, it would include all properties that he would have enjoyed had he been still alive and living. Okay. So, like, it would include dividends declared on or before the death of the stockholder, the decedent, partnership's profit earned prior to the death of the partner, accrued interest and rents before his death, okay? Proceeds of life insurance policy for revocable transfers, for insurance policies with a beneficiary that is revocable. You might wonder why insurance proceeds for this for insurance proceeds where the beneficiary is revocable would still be included in the decedent's interest. It's because it it the designation is revocable, meaning the decedent can at any time change his mind and take out that beneficiary or indicate a different beneficiary. So it means the decedent has not yet made up his mind whether that interest that insurance would go to the designated beneficiary or not because it's a revocable transfer. So for estate planning purposes, we usually advise clients to make it as irrevocable so that this portion of the life insurance proceeds will not be subject to estate tax anymore. Okay. What else? Rights of usufruct, if it's transferable to the heirs, is still part of the decedent's estate. We go to transfers in contemplation of death. What types of transfers are these? Of course, these are transfers of the decedent because there is this expectation of death. So the main reason why the decedent is transferring the property is because he knows that he is already at the point of death, okay? And that the thought of death will be the compelling reason to transfer these properties. Okay? But of course, we have to be very careful. Several bar examination questions already tried to ask this, okay? Whether or not the property must still be considered as part of the gross estate or not. That's the common bar exam question. We have to note that there are cases decided by the courts that states that this type of transfers are not in contemplation of death. What are these types of transfers? The first one is that there's a transfer to relieve the donor from the burden of management. Maybe he's already old and he thinks that he cannot manage that property, so he transferred it to his son. So if that's the reason why there was a transfer, then it's not made in contemplation of death anymore. Or they want to save on income or property taxes, hence they already transferred it even before the death of the decedent. But you have to understand that under Train 1, starting January 1, 2018, the rate of the estate tax and the donor's tax would be the same. That's why there would be no difference whether they transfer it before his death or after his death. Except for except of course for the fact that there are allowable deductions if they do transfer it after the death. Or there's also another consideration because there are transfers made because they don't want that property to be included in the gross estate anymore, because of course you would be subjected to the succession rules, like the share of the children, right? Legitimate versus illegitimate children. So there are various considerations why they want to transfer now instead of waiting until the decedent's death. Okay? So another example where it is stated that it's not a transfer in contemplation of death would be to settle family litigations or unlitigated disputes, or they want to see their children enjoy the properties of the owners before their death, okay? Or they want to reward the services rendered by their, for example, their housemaids. Okay? So if they transfer it before death, then it will not be considered as a transfer in contemplation of death anymore because there's a reason, another a reason, a viable reason other than the um, thought of death, okay, as a reason for the transfer. Revocable transfers. So this is also related to the insurance. Like if you designated a beneficiary to the insurance proceeds after a person's death, then that insurance proceed would still be part of the gross estate of the decedent. Okay? So the exception to this one is that if there is a bona fide sale, okay, or if there's a transfer, though it's revocable, but there's a bona fide sale and the agreement is covered by a formal one. Okay? So properties passing under the general power of appointment, this can be included in the gross estate of the decedent. So for proceeds of life insurance, we already discussed that. Okay. Prior interest would include transfers, okay, that are made or created before his death. Okay. So what would this include? Like transfers by way of a contract. So if there's a contract of sale that was um, that was sold to him before his death, then it can be included as part of his gross estate, even if the formalities, certain formalities like the processing of the clearance of that sale is not yet completed. Another interesting topic for this estate tax is the transfers of insufficient consideration. So for transfers for insufficient consideration, generally under Section 100, it is subject to the difference between the market value, okay, of the property versus the selling price would be subject to the donor's tax. So the law thinks that if donor's tax or estate tax, the law thinks that if there's, for example, a sale and the sale is not conducted at arm's length, meaning the fair market value of that share is more than the selling price, the difference will be treated as a donation or is subject to inheritance taxes. So we have to be very careful because there is also a change under Train 1 for this. And the Section 100, I think, let me check the section. No, 85G. Okay. So under this section, there is a change under the law under which states that if there's still a bona fide sale, the difference would still not be subject to the donor's tax. I think it's better to explain it further under donor's tax than in this case. For the capital of the surviving spouse, we know that under the succession rules, the um, the the share of the surviving spouse would be determined will be determined at the time uh, that the spouses married. Okay, so if they married at the time of the at the time when the family code is already effective, so the rules under that family code will be effective to their marriage. So if it's before the family code, okay, you will use the new civil code, the rules on the new civil code. So, and for succession rules, we all know that the spouse would really have 50% of the total estate because the general presumption is that both of them worked for the good of the family. So both of them contributed 50-50 for whatever property the marriage has. Okay? So after you compute the gross estate, after everything is determined, after all the properties of the decedent is determined, it is assumed that the portion of the surviving spouse is 50%. So you deduct it from the total gross estate. For the deductions, now we go to the deductions for estate tax. You have to be very careful because under the old rules, you can still deduct medical expenses, but it was repealed under Republic Act 10963 or the Train Law. For family homes, it was increased from 1 million, now it is 10 million. And standard deduction is also increased from 1 million to 5 million. Be very careful because this slide is applicable for resident and citizens of the Philippines. Funeral expenses was already taken out under Train 1, and then the judicial expenses was also taken out. This is just appropriate because I think because of the fact that they already increased the standard deduction from 1 million to 5 million. Okay, so the gross estate not situated in the Philippines is an allowed deduction before, subject to conditions, but it was taken out under RA, under the trade law. And then the requirement to file a notice of death was also repealed. There are filings of the estate tax return. You before under the old tax code, you need to file a tax return if the estate exceeds 200,000 pesos. Currently, it does not have any threshold. The statement truly certified by a CPA is needed if the estate exceeds 5 million pesos. Then the time of filing of the estate would be within 1 year under the train law. So for this withdrawal, the limit was set as at 20,000 before. Currently, it's at 6%. But before any cash is distributed to the heirs or to the estate, the banks will withhold 6% final withholding tax. After the banks withhold the 6% final withholding tax, that amount of cash that was withdrawn by the heirs will not be, remember, will not be included in the computation of the gross estate anymore. Why? Because this has been subjected to the 6% final withholding tax. Payment by installment was not provided before, but we understand that there were several BR rulings granting the extension of the payments of the estate tax. So for the commissioner not to have that burden of extending periods for the filing and payment, they already allowed it within 2 years from the statutory date without civil penalty and interest. That's under the train law. So I think that's it for transfer taxes. We'll discuss now donors taxes. If you have questions, please tell your BDL. You can email it to your BDL and then your BDL can forward to me so that I can answer that in our next meeting. Thank you.